There's going to be a blow to some egos. If you're not actually thinking it through, if you mix those up, you're going to have chaos. Your students aren't going to get good, and they're not going to have fun, and they're not going to stay, so they'll never get good. If you are not willing to put in the work and the effort to learn and try and lead by example of challenging yourself to do something difficult, what are you teaching? All right, in today's episode, we're going to look at a handful of topics, including how our Kata teaching formula at Open Budo matches and mirrors some of the traditional Buddhist frameworks of understanding. We'll discuss a goofy memory I had of how I first became aware of the power of experiential learning way back in grade school. We'll talk about leading by example, how that can include setting the intention for each phase of a class, each class within the curriculum, how the curriculum sets up to meet larger goals. Another version of leading by example is challenging yourself in class, in front of your students, live time, to learn new things, even about yourself and about how you teach. We'll discuss some common problems for instructors and how the language pattern they're using is the easiest way to address those. We discuss applying the traditional martial arts idea of SHU HA RI in Japanese martial arts, not just to the techniques themselves, but to tearing apart and learning about and experiencing new versions of your techniques of teaching and instruction. It's a pretty wide-ranging, somewhat random discussion. Come on and enjoy it with us.
So we're talking about creativity, spirituality, and making a buck. And sadly, I'm only about 3/4 of the way through it, and I should have read it years ago because it's great. And it's interesting too, because when I was doing the meditation teacher training with David through Dharma Moon and Tibet House.
Yeah.
Every class, he goes into vision, plan, and execution, but in every class we emphasize the ground path and fruition, and these Buddhist concepts. And in this book, he'll talk about ground path and fruition, and then he'll sometimes talk about his vision, plan, and execution. And I was thinking about our Kata teaching formula and how we have the what, how, and why. And in this case, it gave me a different perspective on the what, how, and why. In that the vision, plan, and execution. So the vision from a Kata teaching perspective might be the why coming first, right? So
like session intention in
session intention, Kata intention. When someone's trying to learn a quote unquote technique intention, like what would be the purpose? What is your intended goal? What is your intended outcome, for instance? Right? If we're talking about outcome based skill acquisition.
Yeah. So this is more like almost a curriculum planning. You should start with why. Was it Richard Feynman? Richard Feynman did this, where he said in one of the fun books, it's like, first think about why you want the students to know something, and what to teach them and how to teach it is going to almost naturally materialize for you. Is that where he was going?
Sounds super ecological, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what's your outcome here? And then the methodologies will follow.
Now, does that fit what you were seeing with Nick Turn and the different ways of expressing that, or no?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because he was, and it's not unusual to hear, whether it's a business coach or a self-improvement coach or whatever the case may be, someone imploring you to have a clear vision first.
Yeah. Vision boards, mission statements.
Yeah. Exactly. And then after that, everything else will follow, right? As opposed to being, say, process oriented. So if we were just starting a widget business, and we just started putting people on an assembly line, saying, okay, solder this thing here, okay, now get your tools and screw these things together, with no idea of what the actual widget is, then you just have a bunch of people doing busy work. And there's a bunch of people that are going to be doing a whole bunch. They're going to be really good at soldering the one thing to the other thing, and there's probably going to be a bunch of other people really good with tiny screwdrivers. but they're not going to be good at making a thing in the end.
No,
They're just spinning wheels,
I,
nonstop, and they're getting really good at those specific tasks.
I think that's one of the worries people have about, I guess, factory style work in any capacity.
Mhm.
Uh, we did a thing back, I want to say, like, thanks to my fifth grade teacher or something, where this was a silly, wow, what a memory, they said, okay,
What was your
everybody
fifth
go
grade
ahead.
teacher's name?
I think, oh boy, Dobie, maybe?
All right,
Mrs.
shout out
Dobie.
Mrs. Dobie.
Um, and the task was you had a bunch of parts to a pen, like a ballpoint pen, like, like the actual ink, the barrel, the front of the clicky part, the spring, all that. They just had to go together. And you had one person, like in the group, you had a couple of different people, like, here, make as many as you can. And they didn't make very many. And then they made a setup, like a factory setup, like, okay, you pass the chassis along, you put the ink in, pass it along, you put the spring on, you pass it along, you put the other part on, you screw it tight, whatever. So they had step, 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 step. And two things got noticed quickly. When you did the assembly line version, they made way more pens, but
Mhm.
what we would now look at as a Six Sigma kind of way of analyzing it, the rate of garbage pen output was much higher
Oh, wow.
because we
Oh,
were just
wow.
like here, okay, here's the next piece, here's the next piece, screw it on, go, screw it on. So they were like
Bunch of
half
janky
screwed
pens
on.
at the end of the line, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So when one person, they made maybe 3 pens in the minute or less, but they were fine. They worked fine.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think we so thank you again for 5th grade class time.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think
So we
that's
really are using that information, Mrs. Dobie. We really are learning.
it worked. Stuck. Oh, wow. Okay, so experiential learning clearly
Yeah.
lasts longer.
Yeah, oh, there we go. Right. Lesson learned. See, there we go. Right. Right.
Mic
You just
drop.
break everything in down. Okay. So, right. So what did Mrs. Dobie teach us here? And I wasn't in the class, but she's teaching us over the decades, right? She time traveled. If you are too reductionist,
Mhm.
then you're going to lose the big picture. I think we've heard phrases like that before, right?
Yeah.
You're losing the forest through the trees.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. I mean, and so this, I mean, to bring it back into dojo land, there is almost nothing you're going to tell them that they're gonna remember as well as they would remember it if they experienced it,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we like the CLA so much, the constraint-led approach, and that method of skill acquisition. Because boy, we absolutely have worked with coaches or instructors
Mhm.
who complain about, "Oh, I can't get them to do this thing, over
Oh.
and over again."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, well, because 'cause you're telling them to. And we know a lot of the times it's an internal cue, like a common one is, "I can't get them to keep their posture good," or, "I can't get them to keep their hands up," or, "I can't get them to get their hips
Mhm.
down."
Mhm.
Like, no, all of that is internal. So strike
Right.
1. And
Right.
then there's, other than them remembering that you said to do it, nothing experiential about that. Other than, okay, my I can feel my body bend my hands to keep my hands up.
Yeah. Well,
There's
think about go back to like fifth graders, for instance, right? Where doing math, what am I ever going to use this for? The typical things, right?
yeah,
And you're teaching them super step by step sorts of things, right? So you've broken it down into the constituent elements essentially
yep,
of mathematics, just simple
sure.
arithmetic or whatever the case may be, right? Where they have no idea what we're going to ever use this for, and teachers, of course, know that you're going to be
Yeah.
using math, but
You
the kids are looking for a why first. Like,
mhm,
why would I be using this? And maybe if you could create a compelling reason why you might want to
yep,
learn, your
yes,
times tables or
yeah,
algebra or trigonometry or whatever the case, then you might have some more motivation to actually do the
and
work.
and it's why, another plug for why in our Kata teaching formula, the very first thing we implore you to do is to set a context. We say context is critical.
Mhm.
If so the students can see, like, "Oh, I can see how that could happen." And I could see how it would be hard to find a good solution to it. Bam. They want to find whatever cool thing you're going to teach them. And then, of course, you do your appropriate, pure visuals, demonstration, all the steps of the Kata teaching formula. But again, boy, the parallels are good. Like in the CLA and in our constraints-led approach method of skill acquisition, the very first thing is session intention, right? So you start with phase one in your planning as an instructor. Why do I want them to know this thing? So boy, this is a fruitful conversation. Every, even though this the choreographed teaching, the language kata appropriately guides them from what to do, how to do it, why to do it. We've got to have that strong why for them and for us. Why teach the kata? Why does that kata make sense? Why does this move make sense in there? Always has to be our guide
Yeah.
for them to get there. Otherwise, it's just worthless. I mean, it's
Yeah.
maybe interesting from a trivia standpoint at best.
Ground, path, fruition, right? So vision, plan, and execution. It just reminds me too that with our kata teaching formula, we are meeting people on their map of the world. We know that they are going to be teaching kata from lineages in a particular order, and they're going to probably, it's in the word almost. We say lineages. They're probably going to be teaching it in a linear way. And where we're doing CLA stuff, we know that learning, so like skill acquisition itself is not linear. Probably memorization could be linear. It could be just memorizing stuff. So it could probably be in any order, but people typically will just do step one through whatever.
Oh, it makes me crazy. I have come to find, and I have my own bias that when I hear someone start counting the steps in a kata,
Oh yeah, yeah.
literally using numbers like, okay, one, then two this, then three this, and I start to think like, oh my gosh, like that is the epitome of if it goes any other way, I'm not ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. Are you counting every little proprioception too? Are you
Yeah,
counting to 1 through a million now? What are you what exactly are we
yeah.
counting?
Every cilia,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. Right, yeah, and then
Wait,
you
how
get
many
scared and
myelinated
then,
neuron is that? Yeah, yeah.
7,000 hairs just stood on end. If it's 6,000, you did it wrong.
I did it wrong.
And it's just a reminder to, when people are if people are trying to just have any sort of self-awareness and are open-minded to exploration, that they might take the ground path fruition, the or whatever order, the what, the how, the why, the
Mhm.
vision, the plan, the execution, you know, maybe just for fun, even if they're not ready to do it with their students yet, mix it up in their minds, say, okay, so I'm going to be taking a look at koku, kata, and what are we doing? How are we doing it? Why are we doing it? We're going to break it down move by move, from a choreography point of view. Um, maybe stop yourself and say, why would I be doing this in the first place? Is this kata a situation or a set of conditions that somebody found themselves in hundreds of years ago, possibly, and they were trying to get the essence of what they learned, in the field, back to, the home, clan, the dojo, whatever the case may be.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a scenario training option, or is it a way to give a lesson across? Is it potentially both? Yeah. What's the point of this is important. And it's session intention on a specific level. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, just even if it's just an internal thought experiment to think in a nonlinear way. Right. Just meaning
Mm.
that we know that learning isn't linear. And so,
Right. And
I'm
sure.
not sure, I can't organize somebody else's thoughts for them. I'm just encouraging folks to, look at things a little bit differently.
Right. And to bring it back to it, and anyone who's, oh, but my Japanese martial arts. So remember, it's just SHU HA RI, right? We're doing the SHU is the what is the stuff, preserve the stuff. You guard and memorialize what it is. So you do have the steps the same way it was taught. And then Ha, you break it apart, you study it, and you ask, well, how would I do it like that? How do I make it work? And then Ri is you let go of that stationary step by step, and you start looking at, well, Okay, why does that work for me that way? Why would I reach up? What if they're taller? What if I'm taller? But you start to ask questions about why.
Yeah.
And what we have gone ad nauseum with instructors about is to stop thinking of SHU HA RI as linear.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sure.
And I know
Yeah.
that's the most obvious way to look at it, and it's the easiest way to discuss it.
Yeah.
But at its base, you have
Yeah.
to ask yourself, well, why am I having that conversation?
Yeah. 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 Just, just because the words come out of my mouth in a particular order, doesn't mean that the entire concept has to be linear, because somebody said them. You had, they had to be said. Yeah,
Yeah.
at some point they had to be written down. I don't know. It'd be pretty cool. Just take the kanji for shuhari, right? Put in a little, fold them up and put them in a
Oh,
bag and just reach in and grab. Here's okay. I'm gonna work on this one first, and then
yeah.
reach this
Yeah.
one and this one third. You know,
You're saying we should have a game where we do task constraints for learning?
hey, there we go.
Which what an idea, yeah. Yeah, I think it would help. Boy, in fact, ooh, next maybe not next, we're not ready for this, but some upcoming instructor workshop, we're absolutely doing this. Right?
Actually, yeah, right. Because this is one of the conversations that we've had because we know that we're constantly working on ecological dynamics and various constituent elements,
Mhm.
of that scientific framework for skill acquisition, like constraints-led approach and other things. And we're also trying to think of more and more efficient ways to help people just do what they're already doing, more efficiently so that their students get more out of class.
Well, here, let me throw this out there. One thing people gotta just wrap their heads around is that if you swear to yourself, if you think that Shu Hadi, the traditional way you were taught martial arts, has to be learned that way, you and or your instructor was just dead wrong about it. You
Yeah,
got to break it up into different
yeah,
orders. If
yeah.
if you can't bring it into a different way of manipulating it, you don't understand it.
Yeah, they're 3 concepts that you should embody all at the same time. It's
Yes.
it's tough. You're gonna have to think of 3 different things that might feel contradictory to you. Hold those things that seem contradictory as true internally, and, as you act externally in the world, they seem like contradictions, they're all true.
Yeah. Well, there's some well-known quote out there that I now look silly for not remembering that there's a hallmark of intelligence is being able to hold two contradictory standpoints or viewpoints in your mind at the same time.
Oh, sure.
And that's it. Yeah, if you can't do that, if you can't look at the way you were taught and challenge it, at least in your own mind, you don't even understand what you were taught.
Yeah, I agree and disagree with you.
Mic drop. So,
Ugh.
hey, you and I have had really good conversations doing like pros and cons. So let's do a pro
Mm.
and con for Shuhari in order and a pro and con for nonlinear, which is probably going to be our
Oh,
preference, but
okay.
it's debate style within ourselves.
Oh, sure. Okay, alright.
Why in order? Like do it in order or not?
Oh, okay. All right.
Like
Doing the
in the
rotor or
verbalized
not.
common
Oh,
order.
okay. Okay. Sure. It's one of many ways to break apart different concepts for people. And oftentimes people thrive on bite-sized chunks of information. Okay. There's maybe
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
pro.
I think that's it. I think doing what, how, why is the easiest way to digest information.
Hmm.
It's the least mentally challenging way to present anything.
Hmm.
I'd say con for that. And I
Hmm.
guess by default, then the pro for not doing it in that order
Hmm.
is your students probably didn't come to you to be okay in martial arts, or they they don't want to think that you're okay at it.
Yeah.
They want someone who's at least trying to achieve mastery in martial arts.
Yeah.
So if you don't
It's like,
challenge yourself, then what's the point going to you?
yeah. Yeah. Said no student ever. Well, my instructor's not very good, but at least I'm mediocre. You know?
That's when I signed up for. I looked for that particular. I want the least demanding, least skilled.
Oh,
It's
wait,
just
hold on. Listen, I just time traveled to the YouTube comments and they're mention somebody just said something about us being Bujinkan, former Bujinkan people. So, okay. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
yeah.
Okay.
No, no, okay.
Point
That's all.
taken.
Yeah, there's reasons. Okay, so pro for shuhari in a nonlinear order. Um, I'll say it's the by intentionally not doing it in order and not any order, like mixing any of them in any order is the best way to really grow and understand the material.
Yeah. 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 So, right. So, when people are learning in a strictly linear way, it's super comfortable.
Yeah.
And we know that the most learning doesn't happen in super comfortable situations, right? We constantly need to be just on the edge of our comfort zone and, pushing past and constantly pushing past that, right? And so if
Yeah.
you're
Like
taking,
Tchaikovsky with with like being mentored just be outside of your comfort zone. Yeah.
y-
Or for
it's,
learning anything, including academic topics.
yeah.
I'd say, and this is going to be a blow to some egos.
Hmm.
Maybe the reason that I'll give a con for shuhari in a non-linear, non-consistent order is you're probably, if you're not actually thinking it through, if you mix those up, you're going to have chaos. And your students
Yeah.
aren't going to get good and they're not going to have fun and they're not going to stay. So they'll never get good.
Mm, hmm.
So it is harder,
Oh, that's
harder.
interesting, right? I can imagine an instructor who is using that as an excuse for poor coaching methodologies,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they
as
told me
well.
I'm supposed to be more random. It's differential learning. That's not it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, you're just full of confusion, and you're spouting words to students.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You read the quote under one of the photos in a book on on ecological dynamics. Oh, I got it. It
yeah,
said to
yeah,
do
yeah,
things
yeah,
out of order.
yeah.
Therefore,
Right,
I'm
right,
blending modern coaching with traditional information. No, no.
right,
Yeah,
right.
and hey, it goes back to if if you are not willing to put in the work and the effort to learn and try and lead by example of challenging yourself to do something difficult, what are you teaching? Right? If all you're comfortable teaching is choreographed, no live resistance at all, that's how you're going to teach. You're going to teach just out of the book, no live questions coming at you that you want to handle, no adaptation on the fly. That's not martial arts, man. That's
Yeah.
I love dance, but that's choreography. That's just dance.